How would you feel if you spent 48 years of your life behind bars for something you didn't do? That would kind of suck, even though being eventually exonerated, that would be a good thing. And I'll get to the story of Glynn Simmons in a quick second. But first, know that innocent people serving time ain't nothing new. And of course, that's what this video is all about. The wrongly accused and unjustly convicted. Now, before we get too far into this video, it might be wise to understand why people get wrongly convicted of a crime that they are actually innocent of. And yeah, there's a long list of reasons. Reasons like eyewitnesses being wrong, and then there's official misconduct. There's also inadequate defense representation, flawed forensics, and outright bias, including racial bias, and there is also cognitive bias. And that is where investigators get tunnel vision, where they focus only on the evidence that supports a theory that they want to pursue, even if it's a wrong theory. As I mentioned, Glynn Simmons served 48 years for a crime he did not commit, despite having a pretty good alibi. Convicted of murder during a liquor store robbery, Glynn Simmons was actually in another city playing pool the day of the robbery and murders, and his alibi was backed up by 4 friends. But none of that made any difference. While the case of Glynn Simmons might make you wonder about our judicial system, I've got another, much older case that's a bit more disturbing, and that's the case of Ella Watson and Jim Averall, 2 homesteaders that were hanged by the neck until they were dead, a decade before the 20th century. And they were hung because they were cattle rustlers. Except they weren't cattle rustlers. What happened is some rich farmer just wanted the rights to their water, so he framed them both and hung them. And he got away with it. If you know anything about American justice in the Old West, well, it'd probably be fair to say there wasn't a lot of it, and there was an awful lot of it. Of course, one would think that by the 1930s, we'd all be civilized and all, but not when it comes to dishing out justice. And the story of the Scottsboro boys are evidence of that. In 1931, 9 American boys were arrested, found guilty, and a court sentenced 8 of them to death for the rape of 2 women. The 9th boy was deemed a retrial because of his age, despite a jury's recommendation of death. Of course, this was the South, and the boys, they were black, so that did not help. But with a lot of legal maneuvering, including help from the Supreme Court, all the death sentences were eventually commuted, and the last Scottsboro boy, Clarence Norris, was released in 1976. And yeah, one of the women involved recanted her testimony back in '33, saying it was all made up to avoid being arrested for prostitution. That, and there were no physical signs of rape, no evidence of sperm, and one of the men was so sick with VD, he could not have had sex if he wanted to. Today, the case of the Scottsboro boys is considered a travesty of American justice. Being innocent and spending a shitload of your life in prison is one thing, but being innocent and called out in public, being shamed in public, isn't a lot better. Richard Jewell can testify to that because the FBI called him out as a primary suspect when his actions were actually heroic. Of course, too, there are the Duke lacrosse players who were accused of rape. They were publicly humiliated, kicked out of college, and none of the accusations were true. But what is true is that with the advent of social media, it didn't take much for people to be shamed, publicly shamed, rightly or wrongly. And that, my friends, is what we all know as cancel culture. From Justine Sacco and Lindsay Stone back in 2013, cancel culture is fucking everywhere these days, and none of it serves us well. Making innocent people pay for the crimes of others is nothing new in America, and I haven't mentioned the likes of the Central Park Five, Hurricane Carter, or Leonard Mack. And if you're wondering at the moment how many innocent people are thought to be wrongly imprisoned, well, that number is anywhere from 1 to 10%. But if you ask me, if you're part of that 1% sitting behind bars, I'm betting you're thinking that number is a little bit too high. Then again, if you're not that person sitting behind bars, you probably think it's an acceptable number. And a lot of people in the legal profession understand that there are unfortunately innocent people sitting behind bars. Man, that would suck, spending like 38 years of your life fucking behind bars for something you knew you were innocent of. Man, yeah, if you're one of that 1% sitting behind bars, yeah, I'd be pissed as well. And I'd be yelling and screaming and stomping my feet. But maybe after 38 years, I'd probably get a little tired of it. But you know what? Look at what the Innocent Project has done. It seems every time you turn around, they're releasing some innocent person from jail. I think it's a lot more than 1 to 10%. It probably, no, I don't. I have no data to say otherwise. I just, clearly we can do better. Jesus Christ. I mean, yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. This was a interesting video. And I have a brother that's a lawyer. He's a good guy. I don't know what kind of lawyer he is. I mean, when I asked for advice one time, some legal advice, I kind of had to scratch my head because I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. But he's so smart, I've never understood what he's talking about. But what the hell? I guess that just says more about me than it does him, maybe. But hey. Okay, there comes a time when a person needs to shut up, and I will shut up. And 38 fucking years or something like that was, oh man.